You're listening to Later with Mo Kelly on demand from KFI AM 640.
Nathan Hochman, who at this point is presumed to be the next LA County DA, defeating incumbent George Gascon. Not a big surprise. Not a big surprise at all. The headwinds against George Gascon, I'll say the hate against George Gascon. And the weird part was his reticence to even engage media, to engage his competition, to engage citizens, to engage his own deputy DAs, just from the people that I spoke to. He would not even engage them, isolated himself to where that this was the eventual end to his, I would say, his political career, at least as DA in Los Angeles County. I don't know what he may move on to next. I don't know if he will have a concession speech. I don't think he will, because that's just not his style. He hasn't said much of anything about anything. And LA County will move forward. We will have a different district attorney who fundamentally will have a different approach to crime. And when you add that with Proposition 36, which is going to pass overwhelmingly, more than 3-1, you can see how people have spoken loudly and resoundingly about what they feel about crime in Southern California, LA County specifically, what needs to be done, what hasn't been done, what has been largely overlooked and excused. And I've said many times on my show that there's a culture of permissiveness, and people have taken advantage of that. And I think part of the reason why we've seen the different types of crime, it's one thing to say crime is down statistically, which is true, but the types of crime has changed. The brazen nature of crime that we experience day to day in Southern California, from the street takeovers to the robberies to what happens on the metro, it's just fundamentally different. And if you want to only talk in terms of numbers and statistics, yes, you can say that there are fewer violent crimes per capita than a year ago. But the bottom line is safety begins with how we feel. And you can't quantify that, but it's real. And I don't think people, if they're being honest, feel generally safe when they go about their way here in Los Angeles County. And this is the first step into changing that. And part of it is taking law enforcement and the laws seriously, prosecuting crimes as they should. And we'll see what happens with Nathan Hochman and see if we get something different than what we had before. It's the KFI Election Desk. I'm Mo Kelly. We're going to check in with Steve Roberts of ABC News and look at the national scene and the latest as far as state projections and whether there has been any updates to what we know in the presidential race.
You're listening to Later with Mo Kelly on demand from KFI AM 640.
KFI AM 640 is the Election Desk. I'm Mo Kelly as we continue to follow the events all across the nation. Races, both federal, national, and local. Joining me right now is Steve Roberts, ABC News political analyst, to give us some analysis of what's going on around the country. Steve, how are you doing this evening? I know it's late where you are.
Yeah, it's getting later, too. It's getting later for Kamala Harris, too. I think that any fair look at the trend lines. Now, we're very careful at ABC. We don't call races until we're absolutely sure. But the trend line is very clear. Unless something very, very unusual happens, Donald Trump is going to win this election. And this core reason for this is very obvious in the exit polls. From the very beginning, Mo, this election, despite all of the turmoil of Biden getting out and Harris getting in and Trump getting shot, the basic parameters, the basic foundation of this election has been exactly the same from day one. And that is that about 2/3 to 3/4 of Americans tell pollsters, we don't like the direction of the country. We're paying too much for gas and groceries. We don't like inflation. Inflation is always the most damaging of issues because it affects every family in Los Angeles every day. But it's beyond prices. there is this global gloom. There's this infection of the spirit that has lasted long after the infection of COVID has gone away. And it helped defeat Donald Trump 4 years ago. It's defeating ruling parties in the UK and all over the world. And so when you step back, in some ways tonight was inevitable. That asking Kamala Harris to run as an incumbent vice president when the country is so gloomy was an enormously difficult task.
Well, there was history which was working against her, just as far as vice presidents trying to become president usually don't do well, with the notable exception of George H.W. Bush. We know what happened to Al Gore and what have you. But I wonder, though, was this more, you say that there was an economic reason primarily. How much do you think was it an embrace of Donald Trump as well?
Well, sure. It's always hard to evaluate which variables were more important because, as you certainly rightly point out, Mo, every voter is a combination of many factors. A woman who might care about reproductive rights also is paying too much for eggs and milk at the grocery store. I mean, so everybody is a mixture of factors. Where you can see evidence of Trump's personality making a difference is in the votes of black and Latino men. 20% of black men voted for Donald Trump, but over 50% of Latino men voted for, 53% of Latino men voted for Donald Trump. And you have to at least hypothesize that the whole aura around Donald Trump is sort of strength and power and sort of masculinity, at least was one of the reasons why those numbers were so different. There were enormous gender gaps, both the black and Latino communities. Latino and black women voted pretty much the way they have in the past for Harris, but there was a big shift among men. Did you get a sense from at least the data that there were more black male and Latino male voters? Now, if we look at history, the Democratic Party has had a strong base among black women voters, less so with black men. Even though there may have been an upward shift towards Donald Trump, does the data suggest that more black men came out to vote this particular election cycle? That's hard to tell. Not really. I haven't been struck by any real significant shift. The real shift is in the way they voted. You look at another number that was really striking to me. A week or so before the election, there was a lot of talk about late movement toward Democrats. There was that outlying poll in Iowa which showed Harris ahead by 3 points. There was all this talk about momentum on the Harris side. They were putting out press releases, and it didn't show up tonight. In fact, of the folks who decided in the last week or so, by 7 points, they voted for Donald Trump, not Harris. So that's yet one more number to factor into the mix. But you made a very important point, and it's not just that Harris was caught in this trying to run as the vice president with a very unpopular administration, but history is really very telling here. It's sometimes called the curse of Martin Van Buren. Martin Van Buren was the vice president who succeeded Andrew Jackson in 1836. 188 years since then, as you point out, George Bush, 41, the only vice president who's ever been able to run directly. And when the presidency, now people like both Joe Biden and Richard Nixon had once been vice presidents when they finally won the presidency, but they didn't do it directly. And that's because there are only two slogans in American politics when it really comes down to it. You never had it so good, which is what all incumbents say, and it's time for a change, which is what all challengers say. Now, when you're the vice president of an incumbent party, you actually got to say both things at the same time. You got to say, I'm defending the record, I'm proud of my service in this administration, but by the way, I'm also a change agent. There's an inherent mixed message. It's inherently muddled. And you can see this with Kamala Harris. You could see that day when she was on The View, when she made one of the worst mistakes of the campaign when she was asked, well, can you name a single issue that you do differently? She said, I can't think of one, because she was caught. She didn't want to insult Joe Biden, but at the same time, she came across as someone who was too tied to the past, even though she kept talking about changing the page and talking about turning over and a new day. She was inevitably tied to Trump, and Trump's ads hammered that home. They talked all the time about how it's been 3.5 years. She's been part of the Biden administration. They showed every ad I saw in the last few days started with images of Biden and Harris standing together and holding hands, and they just hammered home because they knew that this was the single biggest weakness she had.
Steve Roberts, I'm running out of time with you, but let me ask you this question, and this is a general question. As I look at the Senate map and I looked at Republicans, they now have control of the Senate. The House is still to be decided. Is it fair to posit that this might be beyond Kamala Harris, a referendum against Democrats, and the Democratic Party is going to have to do some soul searching between now and the next midterms?
I think that's certainly fair. I mean, the Democrats have already clearly lost the Senate seat in Ohio. Incumbent there, Sherrod Brown. Their incumbents in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin are hanging by a thread. They could lose as well. But you're right to point out the importance of the House, because, and right there in Southern California, as you well know, some of the key races are going to decide in the end whether the Democrats take the House. If Donald Trump, this next couple of years in Washington will be very, very different. If Donald Trump comes in not only with the Senate but with the House, and also, of course, a Supreme Court with a conservative majority, there'll be no guardrails. There'll be no obstacles. If the Democrats manage, even by one seat, to hold the House, that means that will have some leverage. They'll have some power. If they don't hold the House, they'll be left with only one source of any kind of leverage or power in Washington, and that's the Senate filibuster. And it wasn't that long ago that a whole lot of Democrats, including Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, said, let's do away with the filibuster, and we can pass all these wonderful things. Mm-hmm. Aren't they really glad that they're going to have the filibuster if that's the only way they can exert any kind of check and balance on Donald Trump?
We will find out. Steve Roberts, ABC News political analyst, thank you so much for staying up late with us, and thank you for what you do.
Sure, anytime.
It's KFI AM 640. It's the Election Desk. I'm Mo Kelly. We'll have more in just a moment.
You're listening to Later with Mo Kelly on demand from KFI AM 640.
It's the KFI Election Desk. I'm Mo Kelly. We're live everywhere on the iHeartRadio app, and joining us right now with some local updates is KFI's own Michael Monks, who joins me in studio. Michael, how long has your day been going today?
You know, I attended the city council meeting this morning into the afternoon just to, take some notes, see what was going on. I didn't want to miss anything. And now here we are.
I see your 5 o'clock shadow, but it's not really a 5 o'clock shadow because it's like 10 o'clock at night.
It is. And it starts 3 days earlier. So it's about a 5 o'clock Monday shadow, I suppose.
Got it.
It doesn't grow very fast.
Anything surprising in the data that you have right now? Where would you like to start?
Sure. So, I'm following the county. I'm following the city. So I've got some county ballot measures and the LA City Council races that are going on. Let's start with Measure A.
All right, let's do it.
Measure A. This will impact everybody who buys anything in the city, right? So we're already currently paying a 1/4-cent sales tax to support homeless efforts on purchases. Mm-hmm. And that is supposed to go away in 2027.
That's H, Measure A.
That used to be. Yes, that's what the current one is. Uh-huh. Exactly. These measures start to get confusing, yes. I guess, over the years. But the current Measure A would basically repeal that one, but not get rid of it. It would double the amount that you're paying in order to fund homelessness. So from a 1/4-cent sales tax to a 1/2-cent sales tax without a sunset clause. So in perpetuity, an extra
forever,
ever until you, a voter or somebody, says, okay, enough is enough. Let's put it on the ballot to repeal it. That's winning right now, pretty overwhelmingly, 55 to 45%.
So yes, we're going to have more sales tax.
What I saw from the campaign in support of this was a lot of the large nonprofits in the area, including the United Way, pushing the message that if we don't adopt this, the people who have been helped and brought into housing from homelessness will be back on the street.
Is this a guilt conscience where we feel like if I just say yes to this, I've done my little part to help in homelessness, be damned the fact that we haven't made any inroads? It just seems like, it feels like that.
This is what I was anticipating with this, was because remember, just last year we voted on or just in the primaries, we voted on a statewide ballot measure related to more funding for mental health and homelessness and that sort of thing. Yep. And it was very close. And so I was curious about how this one was going to turn out, whether folks have decided, look, we've thrown billions of dollars at this problem. We're not seeing any tangible difference in what we're experiencing.
Test. Yeah,
exactly. Now you will hear from homeless advocates and the organizations that are supported by these funds that homelessness finally dropped in both the city and the county very modestly. But after years of an increase, it did level off and drop for the first time in the official homeless count that was released earlier this year. So they may think they've got some momentum, and maybe with a little more money, they'll be able to address it more. But right now, the voters agree 55% to 45%. I think the most surprising one that I'm seeing, though, Mo, is Measure G. And this was the proposal to take the 5 county supervisors and make them 9 county supervisors.
And add a CEO.
Add a CEO. This is basically a county mayor. And based on the support that, I mean, like every week I was getting press releases. We're going to have Asians for Measure G, gays for Measure G, Jews for Measure G, Latinos for Measure. It was all these different.
I'm going to leave out all my jokes that just ran through my mind. I'm going to let that opportunity pass.
Right, it's right. Good. It looks like President Trump's going to be in office. I think he'll be allowed to make those jokes more comfortably.
We shall see.
Yeah, we'll see. But all of these different groups who represent diverse viewpoints, because that was one of the messages that, like, look, we've got 10 million people in this county. Each supervisor is basically representing 2 million. That's more than some governors. And it doesn't leave a lot of opportunities for a variety of the county's rich cultural diversity to be represented on the council, on the board of supervisors. I have to say, this one, I thought it was going to pass. You know, I'm not good at handicapping, but just based on all the attention it was getting, I thought, it looks like the right people are supporting this, I guess. It's 50-50. Right now, maybe 51-49. No is winning right now. No on that.
I thought if it didn't have the CEO component, it would have passed overwhelmingly.
Are you saying you want another mayor in LA County?
Well, not only that, it just was unclear. And I talked to a number of the supervisors about it directly. It was unclear as far as how that position would work. There weren't any real term limits. There wasn't clarity about how the supervisors, county supervisors, would be subordinate to this person. It would, if they said, hey, we're going to go from 5 to 9 and make it more manageable and less unwieldy, I think voters would have passed that overwhelmingly.
I think you might be right about that, because there did seem to be now look, this is also something that's come up over the years and has been rejected by LA County voters 8 times, but they basically had the same number of supervisors since 1915, and the county's population has grown. So a lot of the arguments you heard made sense objectively. Like, yeah, you know, there are a lot more people living here and the same number of people representing all of these different points of view. It does make sense to at least consider how you might be able to get closer to government.
They do it with the census as far as congressional representatives, so why not do it on a county level?
Exactly. That's exactly right. And that was the argument that was taken. And it's very curious to me that it's as close. This is also an issue that divided the current Board of Supervisors. Now, I attend a lot of their meetings too every Tuesday, and most of the stuff sails through. They're a very polite group to one another. They tend to vote 5-0 on things, occasional dissent on an item here or there. This one created some very serious friction.
Holly Mitchell and also Catherine Barger, who you would think are ideologically opposed to just about everything, were in agreement as far as their opposition to this.
They absolutely were. So, Catherine Barger, a Republican from, the high desert, I guess, and, Holly Mitchell from here in the city is,
she's my supervisor.
Yes. So they teamed up to say, like, this was rushed through. It was not well thought out. They also said they support exploring an expansion of the board, but they didn't like this proposal at all. What was strange was that the opposition to this really had no serious campaign. The yes on G had a lot of press and pushed this really hard. And for it to be as tight as it is really interesting.
Michael, can I lean on you to get one more segment out of you? Because we got to talk about the LA City Council, whether Kevin De Leon has another life. Did he avoid the end of his political career somehow, some way? And also Prop 36. We all know what's going to happen with Prop 36, but what does it mean after Prop 36 passes. It's the KFI Election Desk. I'm Mo Kelly, sitting in with Michael Monks. We'll have more in just a moment. KFI AM 640 live everywhere on the iHeartRadio app.
You're listening to Later with Mo Kelly on demand from KFI AM 640.
KFI Election Desk. I'm Mo Kelly. We're live everywhere on the iHeartRadio app, and joining me in studio is still Michael Monks, KFI's own. Michael, let me just give everyone the national update. Georgia has just been called for former President Trump. It adds to his total. So my tote board, as it were, is Donald Trump 248, Kamala Harris 216. That's the national scene. And you and I were talking about how Ohio, interesting what is going on in Ohio, how the Democratic incumbent Sherrod Brown lost to a relative unknown, and how the politics of that state have shifted so greatly in the past, I'll say 6 years or so.
I come here directly from the Cincinnati media market. That's where I worked for a long time, interviewed Sherrod Brown many times, and even interviewed Bernie Moreno when he was just a guy who owned car dealerships because he was going to open a new one in an area that I covered as a newsman there. And it is interesting that Ohio has become very reflective of the rural urban divide that we see across the country. Mm-hmm. Ohio is a very populous state. There's about 10 million people there, and there's probably 5 good sized cities. And when you look at the map of how they vote, it's exactly what you would think. It's overwhelmingly blue in Cincinnati, Cleveland, Columbus, Toledo, Dayton, and red everywhere else. And there is a very serious disconnect between the city and the country. Sherrod Brown, over all these years, has been able to bridge those gaps.
And I made the comparison off air, talking about how he was able to connect, even though it was rural state, in the way that Joe Manchin did in rural West Virginia, or John Tester did in a rural Montana.
And this is a state that Barack Obama won 2 times. When, not that long ago, but now it does feel like a lifetime ago. That's how much that shift has taken. And I think this ousting of Sherrod Brown really represents a strengthening of that divide that we've got growing urban and rural across America.
Let's bring it back locally. Kevin De Leon, he is a politician of many lives. You think that he's done, and he keeps coming back. There was the controversy of the tape. I'll just call it the tape. In paraphrasing, he said, I'm not stepping down. He was going to write it out. Is he able to write it out?
Well, this is the councilman, like you noted, that was part of that tape. He was the only one of the 3 who is still around at City Hall. One of them lost their election. Another one resigned and ran away. Kevin De Leon said, no, I'm going to work on this. I'm going to repair my image, my relationship with the community. Right now, though, he's facing the toughest threat to his seat and in his political career, because he's losing, and he's losing pretty comfortably to challenger Isabel Jurado, the tenants' rights attorney, who probably got the most press she's ever had just in the past couple of weeks because of the remarks she made at Cal State LA to a group of students. And of course, we found the question was asked by a student who works for Kevin De Leon, but it did bait her into saying F the police. And that has been the theme of the last couple of weeks. Kevin De Leon hitting her really hard on that. So we're looking at about a 4,000 vote lead for Isabel Jurado over Kevin De Leon. I just checked the LA County Registrar. That first batch of votes came from mail ballots. The second batch came from early voting periods over that 10 days. And then the third batch of votes that have been part of this update are also vote by mail. So the question, I guess, Mo, is, has Kevin De Leon got enough of a voter turnout for a ground game? Has he got enough people out there willing to go directly to the polls and in person to help put him over the edge? I guess there's a little bit of room and a little bit of hope for him, but right now this is the toughest fight of his life.
Let's close out our conversation and this hour talking about Proposition 36, but against the backdrop of crime more generally here in Southern California and California. I look, I know how people feel about crime. I know how people feel. And I think the LA District Attorney's race was part and parcel of Prop 36. Prop 36, I don't need to look at any outlet. I know that it's going to pass overwhelmingly. But what do you think that says going forward?
I think it's connected to the LA County District Attorney's race as well, right? I mean, there is a perception, regardless. It's the eyeball test, is what I think you just called it a little bit ago. Like, what can I see with my own eyes? And what I see is making me uncomfortable and unhappy. And that is a rise in crime, or the perception that crime is on the rise, regardless of the stats that you can quote or manipulate. So what we are seeing is Californians saying, look, enough is enough. We're too lenient on this. I can't go buy deodorant at Walgreens without some combination code. Yeah, I mean, like, I have to buzz. Like, what if I'm buying something embarrassing? I'm getting older. I'm buying embarrassing stuff at Walgreens now.
Speak for yourself. I'm not going to own that yet.
You know, I don't want to have to buzz every, so I guess that's the feeling. But you walk around downtown LA and you see open air drug use all over town. You and I have talked many times about what happens on the transit system across the region. People are fed up with it. And that's why you're seeing Prop 36 right now with about 42% of the vote come in. 70% are saying, yes, let's have tougher penalties.
You never see
for some of these crimes.
For a proposition.
In California?
Never. You don't see a vote that wide in margin.
No, you really don't. I mean, we've even got like raise the minimum wage on the ballot, and that usually is something that people will rally behind. Yeah, of course. Let's pay the work. No, even that one's like about 50-50 right now with the same number of votes. And Prop 36 is where it was at today on the statewide ballot.
I wonder, and this was a question I was just positing out loud, if I had a chance to speak to Nathan Hochman, who's going to be our next district attorney, when are we going to feel something? When are we going to see something? Because you have to either wait for crime to happen so you can prosecute it, or you have to do something to try to thwart it in advance. I wonder what the future is going to look like in the short term, as in when Hochman takes office, in the long term, as we see Proposition 36 really play out and people get the word in that there's figuratively a new sheriff in town and he has new laws to use.
I think that's the challenge for everyone who's winning today, even at the top of the ticket, at the presidential candidates. I mean, whoever it is that wins. And if it's Donald Trump, for example, you say a lot of stuff. We're going to do this, we're going to do this and do that. And people's attention shifts really quickly from adulation to complaints and then rejection.
Well, no politician is more popular than the day that he or she is elected.
Exactly.
And after that, disappointment starts to creep in. The difference is there's a possibility, not a probability, but a possibility that a future President Trump would have a Senate, a Republican Senate, and possibly a Republican House, and a SCOTUS with a conservative majority. They're more levers at his disposal, presumably, if it plays out like that, than just a local politician.
That's right. And then what kind of news will we be giving a district attorney in Hochman when, just some random guy who committed a felony that didn't garner headlines is getting a tougher penalty? I mean, part of that's going to be our responsibility, I suppose, to make sure that we're looking at data, looking at statistics and saying, people who are being arrested for this or that, they are paying a higher price for it. And now we need to figure out a way to quantify that to reflect higher safety standards in our community.
Speaking of safety standards, I know you have more work to do tonight, but you're not taking the Metro home. They're giving out free rides tonight. You know that, right?
They are indeed. My spouse took the free bus.
She did?
Around, it's a good time. But today I did take the official iHeart vehicle that they give me to ride around in. So I did.
Look at that. That was very nice of them.
It was very nice of them. I got to get down to the downtown headquarters every now and then. And so they've given me the iHeart vehicle to do that.
I heard they have a nice studio at the downtown iHeart.
It's lovely. A little loud because it's next to the firehouse.
Uh-huh.
So, if I'm ever live from there on your show, you've probably heard the sirens.
Don't they serve drinks there too?
Occasional. You should come down. Check it out. There's a cat.
See, I've been invited to the downtown iHeart Studios where they serve drinks.
They do serve drinks and anything you like.
Michael Monks, thank you so much, friend.
My pleasure, Mo.
It's the KFI Election Desk. We'll have more. We have one more hour as we give you both the national and local picture. So don't go anywhere. We're live everywhere in the iHeart Radio app.
See a doctor if your election lasts more than 4 hours.
KFI
and KOST HD2.
Los Angeles, Orange County.
Live everywhere.